Many people believe aliens have or are visiting the Earth, and the government is covering that up.
You're correct. 80% of Americans believed that. And simply, I believe that the government doesn't know what they're dealing with. There's vehicles or lights flying at thousands of miles per hour, doing right-angle turns without slowing down. A lot of researchers think that they're coming from another realm or dimension. As a Christian, what terms might we use to explain the same phenomenon? Supernatural, spiritual. The governments don't deal with the spiritual realm, Scott.
Could aliens actually be demons?
If these really are advanced extraterrestrials, why do they flee at the name of a supposedly mythical religious figure?
The Bible talks about there's going to be a great falling away. I think what you're suggesting is that this could be a great deception.
If we are approaching that time, as a Christian, my take-home point here is
for many years, millions of people across the world have reported seeing physics-defying objects in the sky, commonly referred to as UFOs. World governments have looked into this subject, particularly the US government, and the report has always been nothing to report. But more recently, we've been finding something, and governments have been saying something's going on. I'm really glad to sit here with you, Gary, today and talk to you about this subject, because you're probably considered the world's leading Christian researcher into UFOs and ufology in general. You've written a book, which was on the table somewhere, but it's a best-selling book, and also this DVD, which we've still got on the table here. Again, an award-winning DVD. So your book's been in the top 50 best-selling on Amazon, and you've been researching this for over 25 years. So I'm glad we get to talk about this again. And we talked about it about a year ago, and we spoke about the alien and the UFO phenomenon, and we established that this was actually a real thing happening to sane people, and they were having experiences that matched across the board, across the world. And we established that this is less likely to be from an extraterrestrial source, but the evidence points much more towards a supernatural or a spiritual source. And one of the kickers right at the end that really sealed it for us was actually these alien experiences and the abductions that people have can be halted when they speak in the name of Jesus. And so we established that, it looks like aliens are spiritual and they're demonic in nature.
Yeah.
So today we're going to talk about the government. What does the government know about this? Because as we mentioned last time, the government have put a number of reports out, and they're actually talking about this a lot more openly than before. For those that didn't see our last session, is there anything else you want to add to that?
Well, I would add, you've mentioned that we're going to talk about what the government doesn't tell us. I mean, there are thousands of reports every year that get reported to the authorities. So, for over 80 years now, they've been receiving thousands of reports, and we'll discuss that. But when you said we established that they're demonic in nature, one of the world's largest UFO research groups, MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, I believe also know, and we established that they were also aware that these experiences that people have can be halted in the name of Jesus. But they just said, okay, so aliens don't like Christians.
Yeah.
But of course, it doesn't make sense that advanced extraterrestrials will fly millions of light years across space and then suddenly flee at the name of some mythical religious figure. So it really did fit the Christian interpretation. The Bible's always indicated there's a spiritual realm and that deceptive entities would come from that realm to try to deceive people. And that's what we're seeing. And we met last night because you wanted to be prepared for this. And so we made some notes here that we want to talk about. But the UFO phenomenon is actually nothing new. So in terms of its modern guise, it's called UFOs, or even today named UAPs.
Yes, that was an interesting point, because even when I've seen some of these congressional hearings, the news reporters are saying UFO because that's what we all know. We all know the word UFO. But in the congressional hearings, all the government officials are using the word UAP. So can you just cover that again? What does UAP stand for?
Well, it can mean a couple of things. It's usually unidentified, anomalous aerial phenomena or something like that. Yeah. So if you Google it, you'll get 2 or 3 different descriptions. But essentially, it's another just an acronym for UFO. And I think the government has done it because, as we're going to discuss, they've started to release footage, and they've always had plausible deniability in the past. And I think it's trying to give the whole phenomenon a more credible scientific bent, if you like.
Yeah, and what I really want to establish in this session as we're talking, Gary, is what the government have been revealing more than they have been in the past. So something's changed, and we want to figure out what has changed. But what you've told me is that actually this isn't a new thing, the government looking into the UFO phenomenon. So can you just tell us how long has the government been interested in UFOs? How long have they agreed that this is a real thing? And I mean, when was the first report? When did they start doing this?
So in 1947, a businessman by the name of Kenneth Arnold was flying his light plane over Mount Rainier in Washington. And he said that he saw 9 shaped discs, a bit like saucers, buzzing his aircraft. So this was a media sensation. I mean, it was front page. It had drawings of what these saucers looked like. And that was the genesis of the term flying saucer.
Right.
But what that caused is suddenly people started to look up in the sky. And so just in that year alone after that report, there were literally thousands of reports, people reporting they're seeing flying saucers in the sky. Now, obviously, as we know, most of them can be explained by natural or man-made phenomena. And the term UFO was actually coined by Edward Ruppelt, an army captain at the time, who later led investigations from the US government into what became the UFO phenomenon. So that's where it started. That's where all of these reports originally started to emanate from. But UFOs have been seen, what we might call UFOs, have been seen throughout history.
Yes, you said 1947, is that right?
Yeah.
So and that was where the term flying saucer came from. And there was someone after that coined the term UFO, and so that's what we've been with since. Unidentified flying object.
Yeah, yeah. But it doesn't mean that today. I mean, if you ask a 10-year-old child, what's a UFO, right? And get down to it, UFO means an extraterrestrial vehicle piloted by aliens.
Well, that's what comes
so
into
when
our
somebody
head straight
says,
away,
I saw a UFO, they don't mean, I saw an unidentified flying object. Most times they think, I saw a flying saucer, or I saw an alien spaceship. That's really what they mean when they use the term. And I think that's why the term UAP has been coined, because it's, as I said, it's trying to give this serious bent to an investigation. So yes, we're taking this seriously. We don't know what it is, but let's investigate it.
Interesting. So the change in terminology is almost to bring us back to this isn't determined yet. Because, I mean, instantly, even in my mind, I think UFO, the first thing I think is, it's the idea of space aliens coming on a flying saucer. That's what we think in our mind. But actually what you're saying is the term unidentified flying object just means that. Yeah. And what was interesting, last time we sat down and talked, in our last interview, you said that 90% of the sightings can be explained by physical phenomenon, by natural phenomenon. Yeah. So I think you were saying the planet Venus was sometimes mistaken as UFO.
It counts, I think, for about 27% of all sightings. It doesn't twinkle like a star. It's just a light in the early evening sky. But that tells you, Scott, you mentioned that, it tells you that people are almost already prepared to see something. If they see something they don't understand in the sky, they're automatically thinking about aliens. That tells you that our culture has kind of been saturated with this idea. And in a way, I think over the years, is it preparing us for something even bigger? So in the past, we mentioned there's a historical aspect. Ancient Hindu texts have records of flying vehicles. American Indians said they saw flying canoes with occupants on board. In our movie, Alien Intrusion, we showed Alexander the Great had documented that flying shields attacked his army. So investigators look back. Are these ancients recording modern vehicles but explaining them within their understanding, or they're actually appearing as flying canoes or flying shields? And I think it's the latter. I think what we've seen, and it's just not my view, if you talk to the UFO experts, they'll tell you that it tailors itself towards the understanding of the day. So, if a canoe was a vehicle, then that's what they saw in the sky. So it's kind of very deceptive, and that's what we established before, very deceptive in its nature and the way that it appears. But, 1947 was when this whole modern UFO phenomenon started. We're talking 80 years ago. Thousands of reports. So literally there's been 80 years worth of research, not only by the government, but by, UFO experts, people like myself, looking into it. So we've got a lot of information, a lot of evidence to help us determine what's going on, I think.
Why do we know this is something that's really happening? People are really seeing these things as opposed to it just happening in their mind.
When I said it tailors itself towards the culture of the day. So flying saucers, that's how they originally appeared. And then they changed shape. So in the 70s and 80s, they appeared with the triangle shape, etc. So there's been a myriad of different shapes, and they've changed over the time. When it comes to people having, these abduction experiences or actually seeing aliens, it was only after around about the 1970s. In fact, you can almost mark the spot with Spielberg's movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when they had these long, slender, bug-eyed aliens, and now all of a sudden the entities appeared like that. Prior to that period, they were more humanoid when they manifested, etc. So again, with just seeing the whole thing move, and as it's deceptive in nature, and because of that, it's also very, very confusing for researchers. How can you be studying something that constantly shifts the ground, etc.? And then you've got to say, what is their purpose for appearing in different guises, as they come along, etc.?
Because I guess my question is it the aliens that that are seeing what goes on in the modern world and then replicating that? Sorry, when I say aliens, we know we've established them as demons, right? So is it the demons are seeing what's going on in the natural world? They see the jet planes and therefore they say, okay, we're going to appear as a kind of a jet plane kind of thing. Yeah. Or is it that that's what's happening in the person's mind, but actually...
No, that's definitely manifesting. As I said, it's tailoring itself to the cultural understanding of the day.
Yeah.
And they do appear.
Yep.
I mean, sometimes they've been seen to land, they leave marks in the ground. There's just an abundance of evidence where they've been seen on radar and those types of things
pictures as well. Like this. Yeah. So some of those photos and the videos, I mean, I've seen them recently where they've had the pilots of the US Air Force, and they've been tracking these things on radar, and they appear actually as kind of, I don't know, a disc shape-ish. So I guess the answer, I guess maybe I'm answering my own question, but I'm just checking with you. Would that be part of the answer that you would give? That you would say that actually, Scott, it's not just in people's minds. We have pictures and videos.
Yeah, people are always dubious about the pictures.
Yeah.
In the past, in the 60s and 70s, a lot of people, there was a lot of hype about it. So people were throwing pipettes in the sky and photographing. And in today's digital age, we're very suspicious about any photograph that we see because, people at home can create things like this. And sometimes I've been sent videos and, I'm not an expert when it comes to audio-visual stuff, but I can clearly see that some of these have been fabricated as well. But when the government is now telling you that we've seen these, when they're releasing footage of Navy pilots chasing them, that's a quantum shift. Yeah. And, we need to talk about the reports that have previously gone because, as I said at the beginning, they've always had plausible deniability.
Yeah, because we're saying that this is obvious, right? We see them in the sky. There's actually video recordings, radar data. And of course, you're saying some of the video recordings and photos are questionable. How do you know that they're not faked? But what are the government doing with the data that they have when they've had pilots chasing these entities? And I think you've told me in the past they've even shot at them. Yeah.
Well, let's look. There's a historical perspective, and we covered this in our movie. And just for the sake of people watching, I just want to mention that's what we're talking about: alien intrusion, unmasking a deception. That was based upon my book, Alien Intrusion, UFOs and the Evolution Connection. So we interviewed a lot of people who'd had experiences and showed footage from the past. So one of the classic ones is what's called the Washington UFOs. So I think that, let me just check the date. It was 1952, July 1952. Lights flying in formation buzzed the Capitol Dome in Washington, D.C., right? Okay. Seen by lots and lots of people. It's a fairly busy and popular place. It's also a security sensitive place. It's where the president lives. So the Air Force was dispatched. They chased them and the lights vanished into thin air. They were seen on radar. And we actually interviewed, he's elderly now, we interviewed one of the radar operators.
Oh, wow.
And he said, look, we knew how to track flocks of birds and weather anomalies. He said, no, these things moved too fast. They flew in formation. They appeared, they disappeared, the Air Force landed, they came out again. This occurred over a period of time.
So you're saying these lights flew over, people saw them physically with their eyes.
Seen on radar.
Rang an emergency line or something like this, and then the Air Force was released to chase these lights.
Exactly.
And this is 1952.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and then we showed an interview from Major General John Sanford.
Yeah.
All right, black and white footage, giving a press release about this spectacular, event that happened. And here's what constantly happens. People want to know what it is.
Yeah.
And he says, what we can confirm is it's not of extraterrestrial origin and it posed no threat to national security.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been a line they've held for many, many years, until
So can we just
quite
slow
recently.
down? So he said, so this event happened, people heard about it, they were chasing them, they didn't catch them, obviously, but they shot at them, did they? Or
No, not in this particular case.
Okay, but they chased them. But then you're saying, when asked at the press conference afterwards, when the US Air Force was asked, you've got this major general saying that they're not of extraterrestrial origin. How could he be so sure about that?
Well, I think there are reasons why the governments say that. I mean, you've got the advent of the Cold War on our doorstep.
Right.
They've just been through a world war. Governments like to give the impression that they're in control. And, we need to talk about some of the reports because it's interesting. In the Soviet Union, there were UFO sightings as well.
Yeah.
And the Russians kind of poured cold water on it very, very quickly. But then, and I mentioned this in my book, it's quite a funny story, really. Then the Soviet authorities turned around and said, well, these really might be alien visitations.
So they had a bit of an opposite tack to the US.
But there was a good reason because in one case, there was something called an FOBS, which is a fractional orbital bombardment system. They were testing weapons that were banned under treaties that the governments had. And so these are kind of almost like craft or satellites in the sky that release kind of particle bombs. And they were testing them, but using the UFO guys
As a cover.
to cover it up, and they were caught out. So there's not one size fits all answers when it comes to this. You've really got to look at each separate incident, try to figure out what's going on. But we mentioned the reports, and I just want to mention that because I've got some notes on here to make sure I got the dates right. So I mentioned the UFO phenomenon started in 1947.
Yeah.
So the first official investigation by the military occurred. It was called Project Sign by the US Air Force. Again, another report in 1948 called Project Grudge. And then the most famous of all was Project Blue Book. And this ran for over 20 years. In fact, the History Channel made a kind of semi-fictional documentary series on it. And the lead investigator was a man by the name of Dr. J. Allen Hynek, PhD, and a gentleman, he's deceased now, but probably the world's leading UFO investigator that there's ever been. I have a lot of respect for him because I don't think he brought preconceptions to. He's generally trying to find, what was behind it all. But he later admitted, because he got frustrated with the government's attempts to cover it up. So when they found something that they couldn't explain, so it wasn't a flock of birds, it wasn't a lenticular cloud or something like that, it wasn't ball lightning, he came up with the swamp gas theory. We've all heard of that. Oh, it was swamp gas. Well, there was no such thing. And he said later he was forced to come up and fabricate explanations for anomalous sightings that they couldn't explain. Right. And eventually he left and he started his own UFO investigative organization called KUFOS, Center for UFO Studies.
So he must have realized there's something really here.
Yes.
And then was forced, probably persuaded by the government to come up with a physical explanation. So I think this is what you're saying, Gary, is actually at least these three big reports you've mentioned so far, we're looking at the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s, that they're saying, okay, this is explained by physical phenomenon. That's the government's take on it.
And when others and individuals start to investigate it, they were not satisfied with those reports. So then they said, well, we're going to get a university to investigate. And this led to another one called the Condon Report, CONDON, University of Colorado UFO Project. So it was funded by the US Air Force, but the university undertook the study.
Okay, so it's supposed to be independent.
Supposed to be, yeah. Yep. So here's just 3 bullet points. They said no UFO reported, investigated and evaluated by the Air Force was ever an indication of threat to our national security. That's always what they come up. No threat to national security.
Yeah, that's their line. Is because you want people to feel safe. You know? We're not under threat.
There was no evidence submitted to or discovered by the Air Force that sightings categorized as unidentified represented technological developments or principles beyond the range of modern scientific knowledge, and there was no evidence indicating that sightings categorized as unidentified were extraterrestrial vehicles. That's virtually the same line that General John Sanford said back in 1947.
The first time.
The very first time. So 4 reports,
the
same information, etc. But the thing is, they are clearly getting thousands of reports that remain unidentified. So as I said at the beginning, what they've done there is told us what these are not. They've not told us what they are.
Yeah, so they're saying...
Do they know what they are?
Yeah, and they're not saying that. But they are saying that, I think I heard you say in that quote that they can be explained by the physics of the day. Like they're not supernatural. They're not saying they're supernatural. They're also not saying that they're... I think the term you used were there's no technology that we don't understand here.
That's what the report said. But the fact is, they do defy the laws of physics. In the movie, we showed Washington Press Club where 80 Air Force officers got together, all so frustrated that things they'd seen on radar, alleged vehicles or lights flying, and listen to this, Scott, at thousands of miles per hour, doing right-angle turns without slowing down. And they reported that these lights had even entered missile silos and had affected the operational readiness of nuclear warheads. Now, that's something I never kind of speak about because it sounds like it's just crazy. It's a bridge too far. But recently, that has been revealed by the US government. So that's why there's been a quantum change. No threat to national security, but suddenly, Harry Reid, who was former leader of the House under the Obama administration, admitted that they'd affected America's nuclear arsenal to such an extent that he wouldn't have been able to order a defensive strike or an offensive strike if called upon. Now, people can Google that. They don't have to believe me. They can watch that and him saying that on YouTube. So leader of the House under the Obama administration, basically, after the vice president, he's the next guy in line to run the country. And they're the things that he is saying. So there's been a huge shift in the way that the government is now treating the subject.
And how recent was that he said that?
That was just about 3 years ago that came out. And I've got an article on our site. If the people just type in government UFOs on creation.com, they'll see that article. Yeah. And there's even a video of him there talking about that stuff.
Wow. And is that kind of him personally saying that, or is that sanctioned by the government? Was it a...
well, no, I wouldn't say it was sanctioned. It's not like the government came out and said, we're supporting him. Yeah. But clearly a man in his position, he's senior. He's not a loose cannon. I think it was a staged, a purposeful release. I think he was basically saying, here's a quiet way of admitting that we have seen these things. And there were also investigators at the time who've come out and supported him in that were working for the government at that time and to continue to investigate. He revealed that the Obama administration, we talked about these reports, but we're continuing to spend at least $20 million a year investigating UFOs. So the government is still continuing to investigate them.
Yeah, it's obviously a serious
thing. And that also, I should point out, at the time of him making that statement, that's when the government started to release all of this footage. Never seen that before. I've been investigating this for over 20 years, Scott.
True.
And it blew me away to hear him not only say that, but at the same time they start to release footage. It's quite astonishing. Yeah. I know that they know about it. Other investigators know that they know about it, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my goodness, they're telling the truth.
Yeah, because this video title that we're filming at the moment is "What are the government not telling us about UFOs?" And so, it's kind of been generally believed, is my understanding, that they've not been telling us a lot for a number of years. But you're saying there seems to be this quantum shift just 3-4 years ago. And I think you can look up news reports of then when they're releasing the videos. Yeah. But at the same time, this guy, Harry Reid, is saying that there's not physical explanation for them. Whereas what you're saying before is these first 3 reports, and so right up until would that be correct to say right up until about 3-4 years ago?
Yeah, I think that's fair enough.
What the government was saying was they can all be explained physically. Some of them we don't know where they've come from. That's why they're called unidentified flying object. But they don't do anything strange that we don't understand.
Well, what they would more say, they do recognise that they do things strange.
Okay.
But what they would say is when things remain unidentified, it's just that we don't have enough access to information. It could be explained naturally, it could be something, but we don't necessarily. So what investigators do, like in MUFON, when they go out and investigate, they look at flight paths and they say, well, are there any strange weather anomalies, etc. But as I said, these do act strangely. They are physics defined. When they're seen on radar flying at incredible speeds and then they suddenly disappear.
Yes.
I mean, if you're seeing it on radar, for a moment there's something physical or there's some energy there that has to reflect the radar signal for you to receive it. And then it just vanishes. So that's the stuff, as I said, that they don't talk about. But now they're admitting it. And
so it's the physics defying. They didn't admit it was physics defying, but now they're saying last 3-4 years, we're seeing it and it defies physics.
Yeah. But they're still not saying what it is. And I think there's a good reason. And whenever as we go through this, immediately I can imagine people saying, well, the government's covering up. So if they're covering up, they must know what it is. I'm saying, and I'm going to say, they're covering up because they don't know what it is. So Dr. Hynek, who investigated with Project Blue Book, he and another collaborator, his name was Dr. Jacques Vallée. In fact, in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Steven Spielberg, the lead investigator was a Frenchman, and that was based upon a real person, Dr. Jacques Vallée. And at the end of Close Encounters, when the spaceship lands, you'll see a guy come out with a beard and a pipe and a set of glasses. That's Dr. Hynek. So Spielberg was kind of paying homage to him in the movie. And the movie, in part, was actually based upon some of the research and the things they'd found. They even presented to the United Nations their finding on UFOs. And I want to read out something by Hynek, because it's important in terms of my pointing out that the government doesn't know what they're dealing with. He said, in an interview, he said, the phenomenon has psychic aspects. I don't talk about them very much because to a general audience, the words psychic and occult have bad overtones. They say, oh, it's all crazy, but the fact is there are psychic things. For instance, UFOs seem to materialize, dematerialize. There's been a change of outlook, a change of philosophy of persons' lives. Now, those are rather tricky things to talk about openly, but it's there. Many people like Jacques Vallée and I feel to some extent it might be a conditioning process. So this is a man that was investigating UFOs for the government for 20 years, started his own investigation or investigative organization. He and his collaborators came to the conclusion that they say it was psychic. They use words like paranormal, paraphysical.
Wow.
As a Christian, what terms might we use to explain the same phenomena?
Yes.
Supernatural, spiritual. And you're going to see that, in fact, in recent years, that's what more and more investigators actually have been calling it. So rather than the idea that these are highly advanced technological craft, aliens are a million years evolved in advance of us on the time scale, and therefore they can develop warp drive and hyperspace spaceships, etc. Stuff we see in science fiction. That's not happening. We know that. After 80 years, we've never seen these craft enter our atmosphere from outside. They're here. And other people say they exist with us in kind of a co-reality. And so one of the views now is that they might be coming to us from another realm or dimension. That's called the interdimensional hypothesis. And guess what? This fits what I've been saying about the phenomenon all the time, that it's coming to us from another realm or dimension. So, in fact, the non-Christian UFO investigator and the Christian UFO investigator, like myself, we both agree now about the nature of the phenomenon, what it appears like, what it manifests like. What we're probably going to disagree about is its origin.
Yes.
I think its origin is spiritual in nature. The Bible's always talked about a spiritual realm, that there are good spirits and bad spirits, angels, if you like, that would come from that realm. Etc. And again, when we look at the Bible's history, those angels, particularly God's angels who he sent, can have affected the environment. Look at the 10 plagues in Egypt, and they can manifest and they can talk to people, etc.
Yeah.
So this is also, what we're seeing with this phenomenon.
Yeah. So that researcher that you said it was psychic phenomenon, was he the same one that was in the Project Blue Book?
He headed Project Blue Book,
so
Dr. Hynek,
So he was the one that was probably a little bit annoyed with the government forcing him to say that this is swamp gas theory. And so he's gone on, and he's obviously, he's got a lot of experience, I'd imagine. He's got that 10 years, or was it 10 years in the project? And then
20 years.
20 years. And then his own research. And he's come to the conclusion that this is a psychic phenomenon.
Yeah. So an important point there. He was at actually odds with a lot of people, because what you find, what I've dealt with, is a lot of people really want it to be extraterrestrials. And as I said, if they're not coming to us from a galaxy far, far away in their hyperdrive spaceships, but they're already here, then they're still extraterrestrials, but they're coming from another dimension. He just said, in another interview, he just said, I think we should follow the evidence wherever it leads. And that's why he started to use terms like paranormal, paraphysical. That's what it looks like. And he even used words like the occult. And I mentioned in his quote, and we've kind of skipped over, he said that it's a conditioning process, right? Because people that see these things or have these experiences, often their worldview is changed as a result of it. It affects people. And, in the first session, we talked about people having abduction experiences and how often they're changed by it. They become kind of new age evangelists for the supposed entities that visited them, etc. So that's why I like Hynek, because he didn't have any preconceptions. He just said, let's just follow the evidence, and that was his conclusion. So that's always one of the difficult things to do in the UFO phenomenon, because a lot of people approach it with their worldview. I've approached it with my worldview. But what I'm trying to say, in fairness, is that I have not shoehorned any of this. In fact, what I'm saying is, yes, whilst I've had a preconception that it was probably spiritual or demonic in nature, but actually everyone else is now catching up after all the evidence. And even with the government now saying that they're not seeing these things visit us, they appear, they disappear, etc. So they might call it the interdimensional hypothesis. So we point that out. I would just say, these are visitors from a spiritual realm.
If you're enjoying this interview, you might be interested to know that we also produce the world's most widely read magazine on the creation-evolution debate, Creation Magazine. It's packed with beautifully illustrated articles showing how real science supports the Bible. It's designed for the whole family and is a great tool for strengthening your faith. Sign up now to receive 4 issues per year. Follow the link in the description.
So just to get this straight, the government's point of view is that they'll use the phrase interdimensional hypothesis, and they'll use the phrase UAP, Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon, but they're not saying this is psychic or supernatural at the moment.
No. There are a handful we showed in our movie. There's possibly a handful in the government that actually do believe it's demonic. I know that in MUFON, there are very, very senior people there who also believe that it's spiritual and demonic. But as I said, sometimes it's dismissed by those others because they want it to be aliens visiting us.
For those of the listeners that have not heard the first interview, just cover MUFON again, because they're a worldwide organisation. They're probably the biggest organisation.
Yeah, they're basically centred out of America, but they have branches all over the world. So Mutual UFO Network. Yeah, I mentioned at the beginning. And so, and in fact, there's an investigator in MUFON who's become a good friend and a co-collaborator, and his name is Joe Jordan, and we featured him in our documentary as well. And people can just look him up online. He's got his own investigative organisation called CE4 Research, and people can read the testimonies on there of people that have had these experiences.
So is he like you, a Christian and a ufologist?
That's a story for another time, but he did not start out as a Christian. He started out as an investigator, and it was the research that led him to be a Christian. He started to realize that these abductions are being halted in the name of Christ, and so he took himself off to a Bible study group to find out what it was about Christians that aliens didn't like.
Is he the one that you've mentioned that he went to his colleagues at MUFON and said, and said, look, I've found out that in the name of Jesus, these experiences stop. And they said, oh, yeah, we know.
Exactly. That's right.
That's amazing. So
they dismissed it. But, he would say they dismissed it because they just didn't know what to do with it.
Right.
And in some respects, I still think that's where the government's at.
Okay.
Right? That they're not telling us what it is because they don't know what it is. But the governments don't deal with the spiritual realm, Scott.
Yeah.
If they empirically can't, lasso a UFO in the sky or, bring it in and do a test on it,
yes.
How do you actually say what you're dealing with? You can't. People just see things, but it's in the area and of, which I believe we're going to do another session when we talk about alien abductions in specifically, that I believe we can kind of figure out really what's happening in the whole UFO phenomenon.
Yeah, you're saying that's the genie's out of the bottle then when you look at the abduction experiences.
Yep.
But the government is dealing with it at a level of UFOs or UAPs at the moment, and they're using some of these terms like interdimensional hypothesis and UAP, but they're not going to the extent of saying it's spiritual, supernatural, or psychic because it's not empirical. It's hard to.
Yeah. It's interesting though. I don't like to make predictions, but I've said that's such a quantum shift.
Yes.
From the past. People are probably saying and looking at this saying, well, yeah, but why have they suddenly changed tack? Why are they now admitting?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's been a question. It's only the last 3-4 years you're saying that so there have been, I think you've used the term before, there's been plausible deniability, but you're saying in the last 3-4 years, they're saying, yep, these things are happening. Here's the videos. We can't explain them.
Yeah.
So they're kind of leading us down the path that surely the conclusion is, well, it's a supernatural type of event.
No, I don't think so.
They're not? Okay.
I don't think so.
So where are they trying to lead us?
So I think one of the reasons they're now being more candid is there's a huge weight. I mean, there are UFO investigation organizations all around the world. There are individual researchers. Yeah. People are getting petitions together to try to force the government's hand to reveal the truth. Yeah, but most of these organizations are what I call UFO wannabes. They really want these to be aliens.
Yeah.
So there's one aspect that there's a lot of pressure on them and they can no longer deny. But also in the past, and I showed in my book, in the 1980s, they'd done surveys and they said, had polled people, and if it was really revealed that aliens are visiting the Earth, they were worried that civilizations would fall and, we weren't ready for that. But I would suggest to you today that it would be a blip on the radar. Because polls have been shown that 80% of people, I mean, in America, there was a CNN poll, said 80% of people believe that aliens have been visiting us or are currently visiting us and the government's hiding the truth. Excuse me. So I just think if the government turned around tomorrow and said, look, we've got all of this stuff we can't explain, and that Washington press conference I mentioned, one of the conclusions, a guy came out and he said, well, what else could it be? It's a technology so advanced we can't explain it. Yes, it might be coming from another dimension, but that could also be a technology that they're using to visit us. So in one sense, I would not be surprised that at some stage in the future the government says we've got all of this stuff, we haven't really been able to first-hand investigate it, but the only conclusion we can come to is it must be an advanced alien civilization that's been visiting us and for centuries, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, so I see. I think I got it wrong. When they say interdimensional hypothesis, to me, I'm thinking, oh, that's spiritual, supernatural. But actually, that could just mean there's these aliens far away that have discovered how to go interdimensional, cross to us via a wormhole or create a warp drive machine. It's
Marvel, Doctor Strange, multiverse. I mean, could be where they're coming from. So that's really where I think they're going with it. Yeah.
But from a materialistic worldview, that's more likely than supernatural beings.
Yeah, the government. I don't think the government will go down the supernatural road. Because it has religious connotations. I mean, as soon as you say supernatural, I just say the Bible's always told us there's a supernatural realm. Yeah, that's it.
So, why would they want to reveal this to us? Why would they want to say that there's?
Well, I think there's a lot of pressure, and I think that just there's so much evidence now. And then when you have retired Air Force people coming out, blowing the whistle, it puts not so much pressure, but it's just undeniable. Yes. I mean, there's just so many reports, so many people investigating it. It's clear that there is something on. So the government has basically said, yes, there is something going on. But I still think, but they're still saying they don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people in the government that clearly want it to be, aliens visiting us from another realm or dimension. That congressional hearing a little while ago, some of the interviews or testimonies they were given were really duplicitous. The guys were not being very, very honest and candid. They were kind of giving half-truths without giving you the full information. And again, it's designed to lead people thinking in a certain way. But that congressional hearing, again, still didn't come up with any conclusions because we've never captured an alien spaceship.
Yes.
We've never, despite all the movies and what we see, we've never captured an alien body, etc. People probably listening and think, well, what about Roswell? Well, go to creation.com, type in the Roswell incident, and you'll see that article I've written that explains all of that.
Yes.
So no real, tangible, first-hand physical evidence we can lay our hands on, and yet we have now literally millions of sightings and experiences occurring all over the world, documented in the past 80 years. Then they can look at historical records and say, the ancients have seen similar things as well and had experiences. There is something going on.
Yep.
But I tell you now, they still don't know what it is,
Yep.
but wouldn't surprise me if they said something. And
because what you're saying, Gary, is you're saying that, okay, so up until now, and even now, today, 2024, when we're recording this, but are you predicting that the government are actually in the future going to say, these are extraterrestrial aliens? That's our best interpretation of what's happening.
Wouldn't surprise me.
But that's why.
Yeah, it is. Well, we'll put it this way. It's just absolutely astonished me that they've come out and admitted that they've been seeing things, investigating. They have affected America's nuclear arsenal. I mean, we said the governments want to appear in control, and yet they've admitted that they've affected America's nuclear weapons.
Okay.
That's quite astonishing.
So
Why would you do that? So there's a very important point here, Scott, because when we talk about people that are having experiences, personal experiences, and we'll talk about that in another session, but generally people only have those experiences if they already believe in alien life. Now, it doesn't mean that they're deep into it. It's just could be quite benign. Oh, yeah, of course aliens exist. Sometimes have these experiences. So you've got to have a pre-belief, or you've got to have an environment where these things can appear so that people will believe them. Mm-hmm. So if the government now starts releasing information, right, and saying, oh, we're seeing these things, we've seen them for a long time, and, here's some footage of a Navy fighter pilot chasing them, etc., isn't that kind of creating an environment where potentially there'd be a greater manifestation of this phenomenon, So are we in the area approaching the time that the Bible calls the great falling away? Because what happens if there's some official announcement, and then I would think if there is an official announcement, you're going to see an explosion of sightings, because that's what this phenomenon does. It manifests itself in a way that's not only tangible, but in an environment where people will believe what they're seeing in the modern terms of it being extraterrestrial. Let me quote Nick Redfern. We interviewed him in the movie. He's one of the most famous ufologists today. He's written over 40 books on this subject. I interviewed him in a hotel room in Dallas, Texas, and I tell you, it was so interesting to hear him. He's not a Christian, to the best of my belief. I invited him out and tried to talk to him about the Lord, but to be honest, he wasn't that interested. But he said this. He said, there's the nature of the entities themselves. They practically overemphasize who or what they claim to be. We only have to take a careful look at such cases to see that these incidents are clearly staged, managed. It's a game, a scenario that has everything to do with trying to emphasize the ET meme. Of course, they could easily avoid us, but here's the deal. They want to be seen. It's not an accident. It's carefully planned, and it's designed to plant an image of ET scientists in the minds of the witnesses.
Wow. So he's a researcher.
Yeah, a very experienced researcher. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, so he's saying that it's kind of a plan. The whole thing about seeing the phenomenon, it's putting it more in your mind so that you're more open to more experiences. It's leading you down a certain track. So the more you see, the more you believe, the more you see. It's a reinforcement kind of thing.
Look, I've got an article on our website called Prepare Ye the Way the Aliens Are Coming, and I think I wrote that about 10 years ago, but it showed that governments and some organizations around the world are actually preparing for the big visit, the grand reveal. In fact, the United Nations themselves appointed a Malaysian physicist to be their official representative, when the aliens land, make sure we speak first and shoot later, don't shoot first, etc. It's quite bizarre. So it just shows you that even in officialdom, there's a strong groundswell that what they've been seeing, what we've been experiencing for years and years, is of extraterrestrial nature.
Yeah, wow.
And so that's why I said it would not surprise me, even though they don't actually have the hard physical evidence. They're just going to come to the conclusion, like a lot of others have done, well, what else could it be? Why, if they're flying at thousands of miles an hour and not slowing down and doing right-angle turns, why aren't the occupants crushed in the craft, etc.? I don't think any advanced technology, unless you watch Star Trek and they've got, inertial dampeners and all this type of stuff, which is science fiction.
Yes.
But people think advanced technology is capable of doing all of these types of things. Arthur C. Clarke made a statement once that he said that any advanced technology would almost appear magical to us, paraphrasing him. We wouldn't be able to distinguish it from something like that.
I want to come back to what we're leading to here, but just a quick interjection question is, what about drones? Because you're talking about these right angle turns and they're going full speed and then I understand if you've got a piloted aircraft, you're not going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But drones are getting faster and better, and they can do some of these incredible things. Could it be a drone with a light on, or? Yeah.
How do you explain that 30 years ago, 40 years ago? Drones are very, very modern iteration.
Yeah, good point.
But these things, as I said, drones are a really modern iteration.
Yeah.
And plus, they do make noise, even though some of them are not really noisy. You can hear a drone. It sounds like a bee, even when people run small ones. The bigger ones make even more noise. So most of these UFO sightings are absolutely silent. They make no noise at all.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could maybe say there's some silent technology they've brought about, but probably one of the things I guess would be hard is, are you saying, because I think a drone, was it 250 miles an hour? I'm not sure what the top speed is, but they're not powered by jet engines.
And they're not traveling at thousands of miles an hour, Scott, which have been seen on radar.
Okay, so some of these sightings are thousands of miles an hour. Okay. In which case you need some type of jet engine. And
we don't have any craft. The SR-71, flew at incredible speeds, but we've got nothing that can. As I said, that Washington Press Club, people can go onto YouTube, type in Washington Press Club UFOs, they'll see the whole conference there, and these Air Force officers get up and they talk about seeing these things on radar, tracking them at incredible speeds, and they know that we don't have craft that can do that. And then, as I said, performing physics-defying feats and then appearing and disappearing. And at the end, just to repeat, the guy that was, I think, convening it all said, what else could it be? It's just a technology that we don't understand.
Yeah, okay, wow.
But I would say, well, when they appear and disappear, it's probably more spiritual in nature. And that's what Dr. Hynek and Dr. Jacques Vallée, in fact, we have a lovely clip of Dr. Vallée in our movie, and he said, I'll be disappointed if UFOs turn out to be nothing more than extraterrestrials. He says, I think it's probably more fascinating than that.
Wow. Is that the quote? And does he say that it's more sinister as well?
No, he doesn't say it's sinister.
Just more fascinating.
But there are researchers who've shown the terrible, deleterious effects that people undergo, particularly with abduction experiences.
Some of that has just shocked me totally. I mean, it seems to parallel demonology in terms of, and the way people, or satanic rituals and things like that.
That's what a lot of researchers have found.
Yeah, and non-Christian researchers.
Yes.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
So it's.
Well, as I said, they're catching up.
Yeah. So look, let's get back to because what you're saying is something really big. Like your prediction is you're saying that you think because of this recent turn in government attitude towards this and what the government's telling the public. I think what you're telling me, Gary, is that you're predicting the government's eventually we're being prepared, we're being conditioned. What you're saying is for the aliens to come to Earth, and we're going to see it, and we're going to believe it.
Don't put words in my mouth, Scott.
Okay, but that sounds like where you were leading.
I'm not a prophet. Let me qualify.
Okay, go on.
I think in all the years that I've been investigating this, I don't think that in all of that time I've seen a period or a time where that potential could happen. If you'd have said, they'd have said that 10, 15 years ago, a lot of people would have poo-pooed it. But now, because the government is saying, we are seeing these things, we have lots of reports, then you're creating an environment where that announcement would be accepted and be more plausible. Yeah. Whether it happens or not is another thing. But in my mind, I just keep saying, why has the government ultimately changed track on this? Why would they even admit that these things have affected their nuclear arsenal when always previously they always wanted to appear in control, not alarmist? So it just seems very strange to me. Would it happen in my lifetime? I don't know. But I tell you what, if it does happen, I think it's going to create a fundamental change, because it really talks about we're not alone in the universe, right? That there is life on other planets. And of course, there are very, very serious gospel implications in that. Right? A lot of people watching this, well, don't have a problem with God creating life on other planets, but they need to read my article, Did God Create Life on Other Planets, and find out there's not.
Can we touch on this actually? Because what you're saying, like I was going to bring us to that, the Christian perspective. Okay, so we understand that as Christians, we understand there's a father of lies. There's the devil, the enemy. He's the enemy of humankind, and he wants to lie and he wants to deceive. And you even link this to the coming great deception. It causes, I mean, the Bible talks about there's going to be a great falling away near the end times before Jesus comes back. And I think what you're suggesting is that this could be a big part of it. This could be a great deception.
Possibly.
And so, and as Christians, how do we stop being deceived? How do we, we need to be prepared for this kind of thing. But so you were saying that it's a gospel issue, whether there's life on other planets or not.
I don't think the Bible allows for, angels aside, let's qualify that, the idea of sentient extraterrestrial life. Now, I'm not talking about microbes on Mars, right? Even if a guy challenged me, said, well, what if they found a dolphin swimming or a marine creature in a sea on Europa, around Jupiter? Would that invalidate?
Yeah.
So that doesn't make sense. When we look at the Earth here, kind of, to quote the Lion King, there's a circle of life. Earth's a great biosphere, right? You have plankton that are eaten by a larger organism, and that organism gets eaten by a larger organism, and we have this beautiful self-replicating biosphere that's self-sustaining here on the Earth. Why would you find some individual creature? I mean, if there's a dolphin, what is the dolphin eating?
Yes,
and then what eats the dolphin, and so on. So you have to have not just microbes on Mars to say, oh, there's life, but the type of life that is able to build advanced spaceships and fly light years across our galaxy or even the universe to get here requires a far, far, greater intelligence than just microbes. So that's the type of life I'm saying I don't believe is out there. Because
some Christians would say, okay, look, the Bible just talks about life on Earth. I understand that, but it doesn't mention life on other planets. And God's made all of these planets and all of these stars. So some Christians would say, well, surely he could have made life on other planets. And this is what you're arguing against,
I think
right?
Actually, in my experience, most Christians believe that because they haven't thought about it.
Okay.
And I don't mean that as a criticism, but what it comes from is the universe is so spectacularly large. And so most people say, well, why would God have created such a massive universe? And, here we are, just a speck of dust in it. First thing to understand is the universe is not large to God. If he's the creator of it, it's not large to him. Space and time and size, they're relative. If we want to measure something, right? So our Milky Way galaxy, we think it's 100,000 light years across. So if we could travel at the speed of light, 300,000 kilometers per second, it would take 100,000 years to get us there. So we have to say, first thing we've got is distance, speed, and then time, and that's how we calculate how big it is. But guess what? God's already there. How long did it take him to get there? If our universe is, 20-something billion light years in diameter, or whatever they claim it is. I can't even remember the figure.
It's 96 or
96,
about
right?
that.
13.7 billion years old. Is he right now understanding or seeing what chemical reactions are happening on a star at the distant edge of our universe? Yes, he's already there. Because God does not exist in space and time. He's beyond it. He's the only one that is timeless. So when we say how long did God take, well, it took 6 Earth days to make it, because he created space and he created planets, and we use the measurement of the Earth's rotation to define time for ourselves. So firstly, the universe is not big to God. Right? And if he'd have made some small little universe, I'd say, well, he's not that great anyway, so I mean, you can't win. But here's the problem historically, right? To say, well, God could have done this or he could have done, it's never about what God could have done, it's about what he said he did. And the Bible is silent about aliens. So to argue for aliens, right, when the Bible doesn't mention them, is an argument from silence. But let's look at the gospel big picture, all right? There's just a few points.
It's just to challenge you. It doesn't mean they definitely don't exist, because there's a lot of things that are not in the Bible that exist, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But you're not saying that.
Doesn't mention motor cars, but motor cars are not a gospel issue.
Okay.
The idea of sentient, intelligent aliens is a gospel issue. And I know that people are going to say this and go, they'll hear it and they go, yeah, but I would challenge, say, you've got to argue back with me from Scripture, right, to support the view. Because the idea of sentient, intelligent aliens, I think, makes a mockery of the very reason Christ came to die for humans here on the earth.
Wow. And if that's what you're saying, that's true, then aliens don't exist.
Let me work through the points.
Yeah.
Because the fall of man, Adam's sin, affected the heavens and the earth. God created the heavens and the earth. The fall was universal. When God restores, it says, Peter tells us the heavens are going to be destroyed by a fervent heat. God's going to make a new heavens and earth because this one is corrupted. So if you've got aliens living out there, I like to say, poor old Mr. Spock and his Vulcan sitting out there, they get diseases and cancers and die. Why? Well, because of what humans did here on earth. Moreover, they can't be saved because they're not descendants of Adam. Bible says it's Abraham's descendants he helps, not angels, for example. Even angels don't get a second chance.
He's our kinsman redeemer. Right?
Isaiah says he's our kinsman redeemer. So you have to be a human being to qualify for salvation. Jesus came as a human being. He didn't come as an extraterrestrial. And he's not going to be crucified and raised again on other planets. The Bible says he died once for all. So yes, it's a universal problem. It's a universal calamity that occurred when man fell here on the earth. And so why did God make the universe so big? I think there's about 13 passages that kind of reflect what the psalmist says. The heavens declare the glory of God. What happens today, Scott, in our culture is people look up in the sky and they go, I wonder what else is out there. But the psalmist looked up, not having the problem of light pollution like we do in our city. I don't know if anybody's ever got out in the bush and away from the city lights. When you look up in the sky, it is breathtaking how many stars there are. And the Bible says that God determines their number and he calls them all by name. I mentioned elsewhere that if you and I tried to even count the stars, right? I'll tell you what, if you could count 1,000 per second, you wouldn't live long enough to count all the stars in the sky. How long does it take God to count them? He just did, because he doesn't exist in time. It doesn't take him time to count them. Determines their number, calls them all by name. So I say, as Christians, you look up in the sky and see those stars like the psalmist, you should go, my God, what is man that you are mindful of him? Because I think it makes the miracle of salvation so much more pertinent, that incredibly powerful, omnipotent creator created this massive universe to display his glory, and he created human beings to worship him and have fellowship with him. And then when we messed it up on earth, right, he stepped out and came to this planet to redeem us back to him.
It was this planet he came to.
This planet, this little speck.
Yeah.
So the fact that that incredible God did that for us, I think, tells us how much love God has for his creation. And it's just not human beings he's going to redeem when the heavens and earth are restored. He's going to restore creation back to the way that it was. But so when aliens come, the idea of sentient aliens visiting us, and the stories they tell people, believe it or not, are very much focused on they're our creators. They've been overseeing humanity and overseeing our evolution for millennia. There's only two ways life can come about. You know, we discuss it here. Either there was a big bang 14 billion years ago and you and I just rearranged stardust over millions of years, or there's a creator. And you look out in space, if there were aliens there, only the same two scenarios. Either they're created or big bang and evolution is what's caused them to appear, to evolve. But as I've said, the idea of sentient, intelligent aliens is a problem for the gospel, because the Bible says that when the heavens and earth are going to be destroyed, right? Just think, if poor old Mr. Spock is out there suffering all those diseases, cancers, they can't be saved, and then they get rubbed out at the end of time with no hope of salvation, that would make God a cruel creator, because he doesn't give them a chance, and that's something he's not. So I tell you this, if a real alien landed on the White House lawn, I'm not talking about some spiritual manifestation. I'm so confident about that in my surety of what the Bible indicates. If it was a real alien, I would have to put my Bible aside and say, that's it. So that's a prediction. There you go.
It would have to be proved to you, though, because as you're saying, this thing is going to come as such a realistic deception that unless we're standing firm on the truth, there's going to be a chance that we're going to see, this is an alien.
That brings me to a passage which I wrote here, and I'm glad we got to that, because it's Colossians 2:8 says, "See to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy, which depends upon human tradition and the elemental spiritual forces of this world rather than on Christ." We need to be absolutely sure about what we believe. And that's why I research this, why I write articles on it, which I've mentioned that people can go to. People on this subject, Scott, they have a lot of opinions. Well, I think it's this, I think it's this. But I would encourage them to do more research, right? Don't bring that pre-belief to it. Look at the hard evidence, look at what we're seeing, and then from a Christian point of view, you've got to see how it lines up with Scripture. The Bible's very clear in the Old Testament that literally dozens of passages that says, have nothing to do with the heavenly host, have nothing to do with the starry host. There are warnings and warnings and warnings not to seek after spirits or fallen angels. In fact, in the Old Testament was a death penalty for going and seeing mediums and so on, if you remember. So if we are approaching that time, my take-home point here is Christians, be grounded and try to look at the information and make sure you know what you believe. Don't be part of that great falling away.
Yeah, and that's a really strong statement that you're saying, okay, if there was beyond a shadow of doubt and it was definitely true, then I'd have to put my Bible aside. Like, that's quite a strong statement you're making, especially to believers, Christians, that would say God has made life on other planets. But your argument seems fairly solid, because you're saying that it's a gospel issue, because that would be a bad, God would be bad and evil if he was going to allow these sentient beings. And I guess by sentient you mean they have a soul that's worth something.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about them capable of building interstellar craft to come here, that would actually break another what we call the dominion mandate in Genesis 1:28, where God puts man in charge of the earth, go and fill or subdue the earth. So if all of these alleged extraterrestrial sightings were really aliens visiting us in their technologically advanced craft, they'd have more power over us. And that would be breaking, in a sense, God's dominion mandate, because he certainly put man in charge here on the earth. That's why when we fell, there were such huge consequences for that.
That won't make biblical sense if aliens came to take over Earth and then had dominion over Earth when the dominion was given to man.
That's another point, yeah. And then there's lots of points like that too.
Yeah. I mean, there's a number of things. And I just want to reflect on that, what you were saying before as well, about the grand size of the universe and how beautiful it is. And actually, so I think what you were saying was, instead of us looking out and seeing the huge universe and thinking in a very functional way, God's must be...
Surely he must have made life.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what people say.
I feel like that's only a kind of engineering or functional brain. But then God's also an artist. Like he's also like, he's actually made the heavens so big, so massive that we should look and wonder. And you said, I think it's a psalm that says the heavens declare the glory of God. And so actually, instead of us looking out at the universe with a functional viewpoint, we need to know that God is a glorious God who's displaying his artwork. And that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. Well, what are stars? At the end of the day, they're just great big balls of gas.
Balls of gas, yeah.
But we are finding that there are extrasolar planets.
Yes.
But even within our own solar system, we've got lots of other planets.
Yes.
And they show us that they're not capable of supporting life. And then you've got something like the Anthropic Principle, which I'm sure you're familiar with. The Anthropic Principle basically says that we look at all of these design features. They might not use the word design features, not only in our solar system, but in our galaxy, in our universe. I mean, the moon is retreating just, a couple of centimeters a year away from the Earth. So even millions of years ago, it would have been so close to the Earth that you'd have these enormous tides that would wash up on the shore, and the Earth's land masses would kind of be eroded away. We look at our own solar system in its position in the Milky Way galaxy. If we were any closer to the center, we'd be fried by the galactic central bulge, and we wouldn't be able to see all the other stars in the skies, etc. So the Anthropic Principle says it gives the impression that the universe has been designed specifically for life on Earth. And I'd say, yeah, that's right, because it is. And that's the purpose of looking out. And in fact, the further we look out, the more that we discover extrasolar planets, and maybe we'll even discover other solar systems, the more it gives us the impression that the Earth is uniquely designed. And that's also what it says in Scripture, that he created the Earth not in vain, he created it to be inhabited.
And that's an amazing area for people to look into. Is there anything you could recommend? Because I think when I've read myself about the design of the Earth and then looking at exoplanets and how they're not designed for life, and or they don't look like they could support life at all. That's a great thing for people to look into if they're wondering that. And I guess there's resources.
Yeah,
on
I mean, you can
just
just even type my name into the search engine creation.com. You'll see a section on UFOs, extraterrestrials, and there's lots and lots of articles that have covered that. Extrasolar planets. Did God create life on other planets is the big one, and people can read more about it there.
So it looks like the Earth is designed for life. It's special in the whole universe, as far as we can tell. That's what it looks like. And then it makes a lot more sense that the vastness of the universe is simply to declare God's glory.
And there's another aspect we've been talking about.
Yeah.
It seems to be the center of a lot of activity, not from just our realm, but from the spiritual realm.
Yeah.
Because who is the pinnacle of God's creation? It's human beings.
Yes.
Right. And so the whole purpose of deception, Satan knows his fate, Scott. I mean, he can read the Bible just as you and I can. He knows what his fate is. So what's the only mechanism left at his means? It's to take down as many of those whom God loves as he can with him, to spite his creator. It's a bit like, when Saddam Hussein got kicked out of Kuwait, he set fire to the oil wells to spoil the victors. A very similar type thing. That's what the vanquished do when they've been defeated.
The devil's going to try and take out as many people as possible with deception. So we need to stand up strong on the truth.
Yeah.
Gary, you've mentioned this alien intrusion.
Yeah.
It's a documentary. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, well, the book that I wrote, Alien Intrusion, UFOs and the Evolution Connection, is available on creation.com, even on Amazon, available as an ebook. And then people kept saying, you had so many great testimonies in there, make a movie out of it. So that's what we did. So it's a documentary style movie, just over 2 hours. And again, I want to make the point there that a lot of the people we interviewed, like even people we've mentioned today, the majority of them are actually non-Christians. So I want to make this point that if people think we're kind of shoehorning that evidence into our Christian worldview, all the evidence that we've been talking about points to the fact that we're dealing with paranormal, spiritual realm, as some might say. So, and at the end, towards the end, incredibly powerful. You'll see the testimonies of people who've been able to halt their abduction experiences by calling on the name of Jesus Christ. We covered that, discussed that a bit more in the first session that we did a while back called Our Aliens, Demons. So the ministry, as I believe, I only found out today, making this available for people for free.
So the documentary Alien Intrusion, it's a free stream and the link's in the description. Thanks a lot, Gary.
Welcome.